invited to talk to you, and thank you very much for coming on the weekend. And thank you very much for coming on the weekend. And sorry for starting a bit late. I usually talk about things that I am currently reflecting on. And I come usually with lots of ambiguities in my head and reflections that are not full yet, because there is always that endeavor of making our own ijtihad in life generally. So when I was asked to talk about is a civil state Islamic, it reminded me of the many debates we had that led us actually to nowhere, and this is why we are not witnessing our renaissance till now, because we usually frame our thinking according to questions that have been posed to us, not that emerged from our own concerns and our own agenda usually. The question is legitimate, the title is legitimate, but it is not posed by us. So usually when you say, is a civil state Islamic, it is the second half of the question of, is an Islamic state civil? And then, is an Islamic state modern? And it is Islamic state democratic? And it's not only about the Islamic state, it's about Islam itself. Because the same questions are asked. Can Islam be a civil religion, according to the Western Enlightenment ideas of a civil religion? Can it match such a notion of giving people the freedom, basing politics on the contractual dimension, building a new society that is based on individualism? And then, is Islam democratic? Would it allow those who do not believe in Islam to have their own say? Would it allow Muslims who want to change their faith to have the freedom of doing so? Would it allow blah, 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 blah? Women, issues, minorities, and you name it. Okay? But I think that we need to look again at the questions that we are asking, especially that being a political scientist, I have been engaged for so many years in debates in my specialty, in my field of study. And I've been engaged in debates across the globe on issues of deconstructing modernity, the malaises of modernity, how the Enlightenment project actually was betrayed by the modern project, how we are witnessing, especially in the works of the not only postmodernists, but also the critics of modernity that do not need necessarily to be postmodern, how we are witnessing liquid modernity, the emergence of liquid modernity, capitalism in its late forms and late stages, different ideas about the malaises of also democracy itself, and how democracy is actually a capitalist hegemonic tool of manipulating the masses. You name it, from the French schools of critique of modernity and democracy to the modern sort of rise of a more leftist, radical, democratic visions, the notions of deliberative democracy as a critique of representative democracy, many things that we are studying and we are teaching at the moment. And then you are invited to venues where people are asking you, is Islam democratic? And then, well, I just left a venue where democracy has been, bombed by all the different arguments, and how it is actually a deception of the people. And this does not mean we want an authoritarian regime, but we want a different democracy maybe. Maybe we need to focus more on different dimensions of democracy that have been neglected, talking about the culture of democracy and the public sphere. You name all the thinkers that have been talking about that for 30 years, the communicative action in the public sphere as well, Habermas and others. So I felt somehow that I'm going to have schizophrenia. Seriously, I mean, we just ended a seminar on all these interesting ideas that are very stimulating, and then you face a question saying, is Islam democratic?
Oh my God.
Oh my God, what should I say now? If I say no, they would say, oh yeah, sorry, you're a racist person. All moderates end up being fundamentalists, we don't trust you anymore. So this is the dilemma. When we ask, is an Islamic state, is a civil state Islamic, the right question would be actually, what is civil state? And this has been a question that was raised in Egyptian public sphere after 2011, after we had the uprising or the revolution or whatever you name it, the change, the aspiration for change in our society. And my answer has been all the time, there is no such thing as a civil state in the first place. No state is civil. No state, no modern state is civil. Modern state is about sovereignty, authority, domination, hegemony, whether you take it from the theory of nationalism, or you take it from the critique of Marxism. You know, no state is civil. A state means a sovereign monopoly of power and the freedom to exercise the state of exception, according to Carl Schmitt and others, as we keep saying, where actually the state can overnight claim that there is a danger that is threatening the nation, and then laws can be suspended and human rights can be violated. The state is a machine of war. The state is a machine of fragmentation of the community. The state is a machine of exercising the power of those who are in the seats of power. So, and democracy, on the other hand, if we relate democracy to civil ruling or civil rule or civil government, democracy, on the other hand, has been claimed to be a way to reach consensus for many, many decades. This was the definition. And now the definition is democracy is just a tool to manage differences and opposite interests. So it does not aim to reach consensus. It's just a mechanism of recognizing that we will not reach consensus, but how are we going to manage our differences and the opposing interests of different parts of the society, of different groups, of different segments, of different classes. So to give some credit to the Marxist analysis after it has been completely beaten out of the realm of discussion in many Islamic societies. So, and my claim and my argument was always, there is no civil state. But if you mean by civil state civility vis-a-vis violence or vis-a-vis a religious authoritarian rule a la Middle Ages, or you mean a society that is based on compassion, respect of the other, tolerance, etc., then we are not talking about a civil government, state in terms of government and power, the state, l'État, you know, but we're talking about the state as condition. So the right question would be, what is a civil condition that would lead to fair politics, that would lead to respect of human rights? And what sort of political arrangements are we looking for to preserve this civil condition? L'état civil, where the word comes from, originally from the understanding of Rousseau, you know, because he invented this civil state. He didn't mean state in terms of political government. He meant state condition. L'état civil de société. This is the condition of the society, and based on that condition of society, the arrangements of relations of power can be imagined, and the spaces of law, and where law cannot help us reach a better society, where morality comes in, where ethics comes in, where the understanding of nobility comes in, and how we define, opposing Rousseau on this part, how do we define the savage? What is savage? I mean, are we modern? Are we enlightened? Are our modern states civilized? The test would be, as you test human beings in their relations and their moral integrity, when they are not in good terms with each other. So we say that the honor of disagreement, that when you disagree with someone, you stick to morality. You don't just push your ethics aside and say, now this is a big fight with the man and I have no moral constraints anymore. The same for politics. If you want to test whether a state is civil, as we assume, see it in times of war. Is the American model of a modern state that claims to be liberal, you know, civil when it comes to the war in Iraq or Syria? I mean, this army that claims to be defending democracy and spreading democracy hired mercenaries, Blackwater, and actually managed legally on the international level not to hold his soldiers accountable for war crimes, and refuses to be accountable to the International Criminal Court. Very interesting. And then they spread democracy and they ask us, is Islam civil? Is Islam democratic? Can you actually cope with modernity? What if I don't want to cope with your modernity? What is savagery? And what does it mean to be civilized? These are the questions that I have actually been working on for almost 20 years. Yeah. Interestingly enough, what led me to ask these questions are issues of women and gender. Because I was faced by the feminist discourse that again was asking, is Islam feminist enough? Is it good enough for gender equality? And my question was, what are you aiming for? What do you want? You know, what is the ultimate goal that you want to reach? And what are the civil conditions of the example of Islam in regards to women's rights, how women are seen? And this brings you to the very basic question. The questions of politics, and this is also another issue, that politics has been refined across my academic career as a political scientist so many times. We started by the Bible, you know. You study politics, theory of the state. This is the starting point. And everything else comes later. You know, theory of the state, whether you are studying political theory, political thought, history of political thought, or you're studying IR, international relations theory. The state is the core of the political thinking, which is deception. The human being is the core of political thinking historically. But as much as modernity was against faith and the absolute, as much it ended up also being against philosophy and the absolute thinking of essential value. Hence we entered the age of postmodernism to say there is nothing essential. Don't take me back to something that you say human nature. There is no human nature. There is a human being that is changing all the time, you know, not alone in terms of sexuality and transgender. This is another issue, and this is the most simple one to deal with. Actually, in terms of what is a human being in relation to animals, in relation to nature, and in relation to the machine. What is different from a human being, between a human being and a machine? And for those who are more aware of what happens now, the nightmares or the jokes that we had in novels like A Brave New World or 1984 or these novels is becoming reality now. I mean, we used to read them at school and say, oh, this is just interesting imagination, you know, and establish some discussions around them to take them as a metaphor. It's not a metaphor anymore, it's reality. Lately, 2 robots have been stopped and this system, 2 robots have developed a specific language. Those who are interested in artificial intelligence know this case. It happened a few weeks ago that 2 robots in a big project actually developed a language between themselves, and the project had to stop these 2 robots. You know, so now we are witnessing really the nightmares. You know, it's like, where do we go from here? And then what does it mean to be human? If actually everything you do is via, there is a medium between you, there is an adapter of technology between you and nature, and sometimes between you and yourself. And I keep looking into the phenomena of the selfies, and it amazes me, seriously. It's not only about taking a selfie because there is no one around to take the picture for us. It's about seeing yourself via the machine, seeing yourself via the eye of others, and seeing yourself through this visual sort of transformation of your own face. And this is very much related to politics, because the very micro is actually also extended to the very macro. How many ideological frames of reference have been also taking selfies, you know, showing the best of themselves in front of others, while actually this is not their truth. And that the photoshops that have been used to decorate savagery have been so many, the filters, you know. So eventually we see an image of systems, and we see an image of ideological frames of reference that are not genuine and that are not true. So back to our question. If we say we will not have politics of justice, politics of fairness, unless we have a civil condition. the civil state meaning a civil condition, and then politics would be arranged accordingly. What is the civility or the civil condition we are aspiring from an Islamic perspective? To answer the question, is Islam civil, is Islam democratic, is Islam respective of human rights, etc. So I think that, as I just mentioned, we have to deconstruct the claims of the civility of the modern state, and then ask important questions about the civil and the urban. And this is going to be basically the line of my argument in my presentation, that you will not be understanding anything related to modernity and civility, or an optional perspective of how we can build a more fair society, more respective of our humanity, unless we think in terms of space and place. A bit of a Heideggerian sort of approach to the self, time, and place and space. Because most of our arguments have been theoretical. And then when you walk out of the room, you are facing a modern city. And you are facing a city that, if it was not for the two towers, I wouldn't have recognized that this is Kuala Lumpur. If you throw me from my airplane and say, where are you? And I see no faces, and I see no two towers, I would say, Singapore?
Singapore.
I would say, if I don't mind the greenery everywhere, if you take away the green color, I might say one of the Gulf states, one of the Gulf countries. Skyscrapers, you know. If you take away the people, if you take away the nature, if you take away the human and the natural, everything looks alike.
Yes.
Malls look alike, clothes look alike, buildings look alike, machines look alike. If you make people transparent and look at the things they are wearing only as if they are moving without a body, without a face, the brands are the same, the colors are the same, the fashion is the same. Even if you delete the faces and look at the hair, the haircuts look very much similar as well. Women's hair color looks very much similar. So it's very interesting. What civility are we talking about, so that we can talk about politics starting from here, from a more of a Platonic perspective. When Plato wrote the Republic, he started with the question of justice. And he, interestingly enough, and this is overlooked by many scholars and by many students of political science, he started with the question of death. The question of justice started with questioning life and thinking about death, and hence in the debates, in the dialogue in Plato's Republic, the person who started thinking about justice was an old man that Socrates eventually in Plato's Republic met, and he was saying, well, I'm thinking these days about that my life is ending. I did so many injustices to people, and I'm trying to give back the rights to those whom I am indebted to, because if there is a day of judgment, interesting, in Plato's Republic, you know, if we have a different life later, then I'm not on the safe side. So now I'm thinking about trying to fix what I spoiled so far. And then the question of justice came in, and then the question of citizenship, and then the question of education, and then the question of politics, and then so this is how we think about politics. This is how we should be thinking about politics. When we take the Islamic example again, what was the wisdom of turning Yathrib? This was the name of the city the Prophet immigrated to. Why was it called, when Prophet Muhammad settled down, established the contract, had a constitution, and sat with the different tribes, and sat with the Jews and the non-Muslims, and wrote the agreement to manage this? Why did they call it the city, Al-Madinah? Why didn't this say Yathrib? Why didn't people become nationalistic and say, never change the name of our city, this is Yathrib forever? Why was it turned into Al-Madinah? Because here you have a political community, and you have a civil state that led to a constitution that led to a political example. And this is how we should think about matters, about that. Communities decide the type of politics that they represent. If these communities are materialistic, if they are evil, if they agree on hurting other people and in them enjoying peace, this was the claim of modernity, that we will achieve peace. Yes, peace on your continent, in Europe, in the States, but not peace in mind. Because when you promised peace, you started colonializing our own countries. And till today, we have neo-colonialism. So what type of peace are you talking about? Yes, you fulfilled your promise to your people, not to us. And then you claimed it's universalistic, and then you started the colonial journey. So the city is very important. We will not understand politics in day-to-day life and see and decode the manifestations of our political and our social and our philosophical thinking unless we simply look around. Look around you and ask yourself questions about civility, about democracy, about fairness, about justice, about freedom, and about all the questions that are asked in politics. The city is either, according to Mumford, who is a very prominent urban sociologist, is the cradle of civility, truly, the city. And interestingly enough, Mumford was complaining decades ago about the fact that our cities today are actually eating up civility. The city that was established or to protect civility is actually not achieving that. It is fragmenting the society, it is focusing on the individual dimension of individual interest, and it's filled with conflict. How we manage the city is actually very important to understand how the wider spaces are managed politically. Who has access to where? And starting with the land would tell you who owns the city and who owns the state. How people have access to land. And interestingly enough, in our fiqh in Islam, talk about our understanding of politics and our original understanding of our role. There is the notion of ihya. Ihya means revival. Any person who revives a deserted land has the right to have the land. The land is not capital in terms of capitalist capital. Okay? And this was the starting point of the nation state and the territorial state and the cartographic mentality. In Egypt today, in my country where I can give examples from, the state owns the land and the army owns the state. It's running the state, okay? So every morning, the president, who is originally a general, this is not a secret, this is not attack, this is not criticism, this is a fact. I'm saying facts, okay? Every day, he distributes or he assigns more land to the army, okay? About a year ago, I think, there was a law, there was a decree by the president. We call it a Republican decree, Qarar Jumhuri, okay? So that the army would put its hand on 2 kilometers right and left all the highways in Egypt. And of course, if you ask why, they would say national security. And if you say, can I have more explanation? Say, no. National security is not open to anyone. Well, I'm not an anyone, I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen, okay? And I'm giving an example of my country because I know the country, but I know that this is the modern state everywhere. So on one hand, not to be too harsh on one country, because you have to understand the paradigm. It's not about names or people or those who are in power. It's about the system that is functioning of the modern state. This is how it works. The land that is supposed to be owned by the nation, there is no nation. The nation is represented by the voices of those who are in power, and those who are the most powerful in power are those who have arms. It's as simple as that. I mean, I'm not saying anything that is new. It's just that you have to put the facts in order. Instead of putting this fact at the end, put it at the front. You know, this is how things work. And this is how, if we look at least to the Middle East politics that I know more than East Asia, you know, this has been the case all the time. So the city tells you a bit about politics and the relations of power. The city tells you about economics, about capital, about flows of capital, about globalized neoliberalism. It's interesting, and that by law, instead of protecting the land of the nation, actually more and more countries are making more and more laws to allow others to take the land of the people while depriving the people of the land and sometimes even displacing them. You know, you come and you say, okay, Kuala Lumpur, put it on the map. This is what Lefebvre calls the ideology of urban planning. Okay, put it on the map. Where are the best locations? Okay, we want that land and we will put it for investment, for foreign investment, to get foreign currency. Okay, oh, oops, there is a tribe living there. Oh, there are poor people. These used to be the outskirts of the city, but when the city grew, these are locations that are very central now. Okay, those people need to get out. You come to me and say, sorry, have to evacuate your home. Oh, seriously, why? Oh, because of the planning. We have a new planning of the city to modernize. Okay, what about my right to the land? We will compensate you. What if I don't want to be compensated? Oh, actually, you don't have a choice. Ideology of urban planning. This is the most important ideology today in the world. Not Marxism, not even Islamism, not democracy, not liberalism. Urban planning is the new religion. You know? And you have to adhere and say amen. Because if you stand against it, you're standing against more income for the country. Okay, what about more income for the country and respect of my rights? We have now, again, in the case of Egypt, a case of an island in the Nile that is called Warraq. This island in the Nile is now subject to, I think, 160,000 estimated, 160. You can never tell the numbers because of informal housing, which is human housing. Informal means that the government did not formally, officially provide people with housing, so they started building their own houses. Very simple, you know, but this is a crime because you are using the land that is owned by the state as a human being because you simply need a roof. And this is illegal. And here comes the question of what is legal and what is moral. Sometimes the law is immoral. And sometimes the law is immoral and against religion. So where are the ulama here? Why don't they speak about the land as much as they speak about the body of women? These are spaces, and these are spaces. Why do they focus on the tiny space of the body of women, and they don't focus on the spaces of land taken from the poor and given to God knows who? Because you can give it to a Malaysian or an Egyptian or a Libyan or a Moroccan, you know, whatever you name it, businessman, and tomorrow it's owned by someone else. Because laws allow now people to own across borders. So, and you are asking me about the civil state? Is Islam prone to establish a civil state? Actually, yes. A civil state in terms of civil condition. And if you read the fiqh that has been attacked saying, oh, this is a heritage, in that heritage of 15th century of Islam, you will find amazingly huge numbers of fiqhi opinions and fatwas that actually give right of land to the people and give right of neighborhood, the al-shuf'a, al-irtifaq, haqq whatever. You just read the fiqh, because we have been reading only the fiqh in the personal issues, focused on the body, interestingly, in a transcendental faith, you know, but you don't focus on the rights of people and how they are created on this earth actually to make i'mar, to sort of improve the condition of this planet. But eventually it's now subject to fighting and wars. So this is an issue. Look at the city. The city is also, as David Harvey said, a machine of fragmentation all the time, with rising individualism and with the proximity of the bodies and the distance between the ideas and the thoughts and the feelings. We live next to each other like this, but we don't know anything. I once happened to live in a big building in Cairo, where the building was 15 floors, and each floor had 15 apartments, long corridor, okay? And it's impossible to apply the moral, ethical condition of haqq al-gar, the right of the neighbor. I mean, how can I say hello, good morning, and ask about the condition of my neighbor if I have in one floor 15 neighbors? And I was thinking at the time about issues of morality on another level, and then I once was in the elevator, and then I just started thinking, this building is un-Islamic. Can buildings be un-Islamic? Yes, sure, I can assure you, buildings can be un-Islamic. And they can be against humanity and compassion, because the space does not allow me to be compassionate. I wish I could ask about my neighbors, but there are so many. And hence, those who designed the building did not bother about the relation between the people who live in the building. They bothered more about using the piece of land as much as they could to squeeze it to get money. So instead of building 7 flats or 2 buildings or 3 buildings, no, just 1 building and 1 big corridor, and the hell with all the values that people believe in. So yes, cities can be un-Islamic, and yes, buildings can be un-Islamic, and yes, streets can be un-Islamic, and yes, everything that is around us, if it is an obstacle between us and ourselves, and obstacle between us and nature, is un-Islamic. And it will only, to go back to the political question, produce relations of power that are hegemonic. And you can test it on the very small level. Who then runs the building of that 15 by 15? The most rich person who would say, if we want to have a committee, Haji Fulan is a businessman, and he has some time, he has some time and some money as well to have the luxury of looking after the building while I work twice a day. I work in 2 different jobs, I teach in 2 different universities, so I really don't have the time. So this man would take care of it, and then one day you go back to the building, and in the reception you find that he put ceramic that we put in the bathrooms in the reception. This is his taste, and he said, now I cleaned it for you. But it looks so ugly, and beauty is a very important thing. Beauty and happiness were the core of political thinking across history. Yes. And Elma was talking to me today about her trip to Iran, and she said she was amazed by beauty. And she showed me pictures of Asfahan. But what is more important, and what she noticed, she said, the people who created these beautiful cities must have had such a mood of peace and tranquility. Because this is just a product of the people who built that civilization. Tourists go, take pictures, take selfies, and leave, and say, oh, it was beautiful. But there is a story behind that beauty, a story of a civil state, a story of a civil condition, a story of an understanding of life, a story of a community, a story of artists who thought that this is their own jihad, not to make life ugly, but to make life beautiful. And this is a political doctrine as well. It's not only about, advocating or preaching beauty. No, it's also preaching justice. Because in such a society where beauty is so important, I don't think that the ugly acts of injustice would be tolerated. And you will definitely, if you dig into these cities, you will find that they had a very strong customary sort of law based on justice and fairness, that there was a notion of compassion, a notion of ithar, giving away to those who need, a notion of fighting poverty in a way, because there is no way that someone can build such a beautiful building while people are around sort of completely without rights. It's hard to imagine, and we have to look into that in fiqh and in history as well. One of the most important books that were published lately is a book by Armando Salvatore titled Sociology of Islam. And I mentioned that in a lecture yesterday, that he said most of our analysis in political science and social sciences and Islamic studies, when we study Islamic history, is that we focus on knowledge and power. So we study the structure of the state, the structure of the different kingdoms, dynasties, we study wars, we study ghazawat, we study the frames of institutions, governance, good governance, as it's called today, but we don't actually see how the society moved within history. We don't see the models and the formations of civility in day-to-day life. Civility here, we do not mean etiquette, being nice and good and caring, but civility means the model of social interaction, the way people looked at each other and respected each other, and also the right to spaces of the city, but also spaces of privacy as well. I mean, enjoying privacy is something very important for any civilized community. As much as we have common space, we have a public sphere, we have a deliberative way of discussing our matters and deciding for our own destiny, but we also have respect for private spaces. And this distinction between the private, the individual, and the public is very important, and it's very much established also in the Islamic model. City and civility has been defined also back to Rousseau and savagery, according to the Enlightenment, but also has been defined lately in political science and social sciences since the early 20th century, especially in anthropology, as vis-a-vis the tribe, vis-a-vis what is not urban. So you don't expect to find civility outside the urban space. So civility means city. People move to the city to become civilized, okay? This is a myth. Especially if you know, of course, in any society there are injustices. Tribes can be a nightmare. Of course, this sort of imposition of a specific culture, etc. But those who see the nightmare should also see the solidarity networks. Should also know, and this is a question that Diane Singerman, a very good friend from Washington University, did her PhD on. She said, lower middle class people in Cairo have so little income, yet they manage, because she lived with one of those families, to prepare their daughters for marriage by saving money and sort of preparing nice furniture for her and being able to buy all the things that she needs to establish her tiny small flat. So, and it's much nicer than theirs. They save for her to have the nice future, and their house is very modest. I said, where do they get the money from? According to the economic calculations of inflation and income, there is no way those people can survive, let alone save money. And she asked the question, and then she found out the power networks. Not the power in terms of the pyramid, the power in terms of the circle. Okay? Because we think in power in terms of the pyramid, not Egyptian generally. In power you have the elite, the state, and then you have the people, the masses. And in between civil society, that can be banned by one law. November 2016, we had a law of civil society in Egypt that actually lamed completely the civil society. You can read about it. Any initiative in civil society, if it's not approved by security, is considered a crime, and you can face 5 to 15 years of prison. You cannot sort of, it's not only about money, it's not about collecting money illegally, it's about doing anything in the public sphere without permission. So this compassion, spontaneity initiative are banned. It's just, the state does not want anything except the individual. So, and this is everywhere. This is the nation state. This is the modern nation state. So, interestingly enough, also to contribute to the deconstruction of myths upon which our social sciences have been built, religion will fade away, the tribe will fade away. Okay? And people will become modernized, and they will choose to be so. They don't want to have the affiliations of a big community. They want to be individual and to they have the right of self-fulfillment. And then we would have a civil state, according to their argument. Okay? Interestingly enough, for the past 10 years, the amount of books about the return of the tribal affiliations and networks is amazing. Starting from what looks like a tribe, and it was very clever to realize, oh, this looks like a tribe, the diasporic networks. And the use of modern technology to link people who immigrated to other countries. And one of the biggest names about diasporic networks as a writer and scholar is Saskia Sassen. She's a very famous sociologist, and she spotted the sociology of global international relations. And she said those people who move from one country to the other, the Pakistanis and Bengalis and Indians in London, or the Turks in Germany, or how do they relate to their culture? How come they still survive and they go to mosques, or the Indians go to their places of worship, and generation after generation? How come they did not melt into the melting pots of modern society? And she found out that either they kept the culture, and with technology and social media, they started diasporic networks. And then I lived amongst the Pakistani community in Britain when I was there, not amongst the Arabs. I lived with the Pakistanis and Bengalis. And it was amazing that girls who actually graduated from SOAS and LSE were forced to go back and marry their cousins in the village in Pakistan. And I was surprised. And they bring them, and this guy is not educated. He just finished high school. And I would look at my friend and say, why did you accept that? And she said, I don't have an option. I mean, my family, her father considers that if he gives his daughter away to whatever choices she makes, even if she marries a Muslim, but who is not Pakistani or Bengali or Indian or whatever, then his community back home would look at him as, oh, you became modernized and westernized. And so they themselves don't do that anymore back home while he is doing it. And this is what was called in sociology the third place. You imagine a space as an immigrant where you hold to the traditions that in the real societies have developed and changed, but you sort of want to hold to them and turn them into stone, because this is the wall that is protecting you from seeing yourself as having changed the tradition of the ancestors. And while your own society back home changed, you didn't, and you become much more conservative than your own cousins back home. And there are so many things that come into that as well. So these diasporic networks look very much also tribal. Plus the return of the tribe, of course, when the state collapses, in the case, for those who are following, of Iraq and Syria. The tribe did not disappear. And when the states collapsed, the tribe emerged again. Not only emerged as a tool of political negotiation, which it is, but also a tool of solidarity, providing people of necessities, protecting them, you know, and there is a return of the tribe. And actually the tribe never disappeared in Africa and never disappeared in Asia, and to a great extent not even in Latin America. So you read something and you walk around and see something else. That's why I tell my students all the time, when you are asked theoretical questions, take a minute, take a breath, and look around you. Because you are not supposed to answer questions that are based on myths. You should become much more, not transcendental only, but also more pragmatic. You know, look to reality around you, look to the city, look to the world, look to news, and try to make sense of this world around you. So when someone asks you about, is your faith democratic, is your faith civil, is your faith prone to be modernized, you should know more about asking the right questions and turning the question upside down and asking essential questions about humanity, about compassion, about civility, about faith, about the transcendental, about ethical thinking, about politics, about globalization and the crimes done not only in wars but structurally. The structures of modernity and the structures of globalization in day-to-day life undermine your humanity. It does not mean that we need to go back to some history, because as we discussed yesterday in our meeting, we were discussing yesterday in a group the book of The Impossible State by Wael Hallaq, and he was misinterpreted of trying to deconstruct modernity. Oh, you want us to go back to the desert, to go back to the early history of Islam. No, the early history of Islam is important to look into, to see the foundations of building a moral society, as much as every student in any Western university has to study the Republic of Plato. It's a compulsory reading for social science and philosophy and the political science, and you can't do without it. You can't say, what are we reading this? This is Torah, this is Salafism of Western philosophy. Why should we go as Salafi as Plato and Aristotle? We don't think this way, because we're not looking for going back to history. We're trying to capture the argument. What are the arguments that they were talking about? And in human life, in intellectual life, across history, the questions were always the same. How can we live a good life? Who are we? Identity. How can we live together? Society, human nature, and the cosmos. The question of the cosmos, of course, declined because we don't see the cosmos anymore. We are surrounded by buildings, so we don't see the sky. You know, the flat I live in now, I was always asked, why do you live there? Because it's not very close to the university where I teach, and I say, because I see the sky. It's very important for me to see the sky. In the morning, I wake up, I open the window, I see the sky. In other places I lived, I opened the window, I didn't see anything. You know, and this also affects the way we think. Because the horizons of significance and the horizons of meaning are affected by your level of understanding that there is a horizon in the first place that is far away and should strive to go and look for it. So questions of politics cannot be separated from questions of human nature, type of society, notions of civility, and our standing of what we want to do. When you say to people, I'm an environmentalist, I want to go back to to nature. I want to live in a space where I depend on a small on my sheep for eating food, and on my having natural milk, and have a simple life. They say, oh, this is so romantic, and this is so aspiring, and this is, yes, we need to go back to nature. If you tell them, we want to do that because it helps you become a better faithful person, because it helps you see God more in everything you do. If you go out to nature, they say, oh, again, the religious discourse. Oh my God, no. If you say you can use your hands to eat food, because where I come from, it's not common, as you do, to eat rice with your hands. No, it's not common. Where I come from, that's not common. It's culture. So you say, use your hand. They say, oh, you want us to do like the Arabs in early Islam? Because some people also say it's Sunnah, okay? But if you say do it because this environmentalist or this naturalistic person or this Buddhist master said, if you touch the food and put it in your mouth, you're closer to nature and it helps you digest better. And so, oh, how interesting. How interesting. This is, I should try it. You know, it's like, again, what sort of ideas are we consuming as much as what sort of spaces are we consuming? I suggest that we try to build on that a new discourse. The Islamic discourse for the past 100 years has been stuck in questions asked by the other. It's important to communicate with the other, relate to the other, you know, and we are not others, we are human beings at the end of the day. God says, Ya ayyuhal insan, ya ayyuhal nas. He calls us all as human beings in the Quran. But we also should think about how to initiate our own understanding of the world and to restructure our definitions of politics, community, the self, and happiness. And I think this is a starting point. As a political scientist and political theorist, our sciences have been built on the wrong foundations, and we need to put them back on feet instead of them standing on their head. Thank you very much.